You know, you as a guitar player yourself, you know, and you think about that gain. One of the things that attracted me to Van Halen, I think, was that the guitar sound itself was so distorted for the time, and it had that clarity at the same time that we all know.
Right.
You know, and so much of that was in his hands. You know, we've discussed how people always discuss how they play the
Oh, yeah.
reggae. It's not Eddie Van Halen. Yeah, even with the 5150s, as gained up as a lot of those were, you would have been seeing that was 2004, so you would have been at the first generation of those amps.
Right, right.
But he would run them on the red channel, right, for pretty much all of it.
I probably. I mean, it
Yeah,
was
really gained up, but he didn't.
very
He, did,
clean.
he didn't sound gained up. You know what I mean?
No.
For something
Well,
about
it's like like the mythical, super lead that he had, his plexi from,
sure.
wherever that amp actually came from. I've heard a number of stories that it was the house amp at Perkins Palace in Pasadena. I've heard it came from England. I mean, I've heard all. I mean, they obviously came from England, but that he bought it from somebody and they shipped it over. I mean, I've heard all kinds of stories. I mean, I don't know if anyone really knows that. Do you
Yeah,
know really knows where that
Mike
name
said
came
that. Mike said that it was a store there, something in Grassbuke. It's a weird name. That was more of a band type instrument store. This is what
from?
Eddie told him. And when he tells the story at the thing I was at the Smithsonian, where he gets the amp and it's 220, and he doesn't
Oh,
realize it's the wrong voltage, and then he
right,
goes to get the Variac in order to get the voltage down because otherwise it's blowing a fuse every time he plugs it in,
right,
and that's kind of where he got the Variac idea, or that's the
hmm
revelation there, and so yeah, I had heard it was that, like you said, was a house amp at a place, but I think he might have had two. He said he had two at different times, but I think the one that we heard is the 221.
right. There are pictures of them at the whiskey,
Mm-hmm.
and the heads are on like his cabinets are here, and the
Mm-hmm.
heads are on the side of the stage.
Yep.
And I've seen two heads sitting there with the Variac sitting in the center,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
in some of those in the pictures.
He definitely had
Um,
two heads in the early days, and I don't know.
yeah,
We know there's the Grail head, and then there were some other ones that I ran across that ended up with Chris Holmes, the white ones.
mhm.
The white ones you see in the early photos. There is a lot of gear swapping going on between him and
Yeah,
Chris,
I've heard that too. Yeah, yeah.
and a lot the cabinets were Chris's, the ones with no Tolex. I mean, what's his Greg Leon told me that Chris Holmes told him the reason there wasn't Tolex is because they're all stolen.
They were all stolen. Well, I
Yeah,
sent you that picture that one when that
yeah,
George Lynch had
yeah,
receiver
yeah,
Billy Ray Cyrus.
yeah,
And so it's cabinet sitting on top. And I was like, and Robbie Crane is the one who told me, he goes, dude, that was Eddie Van Halen's cabinet. He gave it to George years ago.
Mhm.
So there may have been a lot of them.
There were.
I mean,
There were, they
I
had
don't know.
8 on stage, but I know that, Greg told me that they would let him. They would swap back and forth. And the guy
Yeah,
that was with me last week, from Ruben Reza from L.A., he was at a place where when Chris and Lita Ford broke up, all of Chris's gear got put into a garage where he was a friend with a guy, and he got to
mhm.
play all of his stuff. and
Wow.
he said it was, and a lot of it was Eddie's. And so he went over there just to play it, and he said it was just, it had Doug Messenger said this in his interview, that Eddie said, look at how this sounds and plays and how much
Mhm.
response I can get from this amp. And Ruben said the same thing. He said it was not super loud either. It wasn't real loud, but it had that compressed
Right, right,
thing. I
right.
think Dave Friedman's kind of tapped into this whole idea of what Eddie's amp was doing then. And
Mhm.
yeah, and he said it just sounded incredible, but at the same time wasn't ripping his head right off. So it may have been the
Right.
Variac, because there was a Variac, he said, and
Yeah, yeah.
so those guys definitely had some sort of gear partnership going on with Chris.
Yeah, it's funny because I think Eddie's, and I've heard this about Randy Rhoads too, their financial situations at those times, you
Sure,
know, getting a Marshall stack, let alone 8 or whatever, it was impossible. And
sure.
so there was a lot of borrowing gear and going back and forth, trading stuff, and the Chris Holmes stuff, like his red, what is it, the Destroyer, the
Yep,
red
yep,
one.
yep.
It's like you've seen Eddie use that on which tour did he use that on? The second tour? I've
He
seen
used it.
pictures of it.
The red one he used it on the recording of Women and Children First. I don't know if he toured with it.
'Cause I've seen some pictures of. I know I've seen at least one or two pictures of Ed with that one on a
Yeah,
live show.
he might. Yeah, he might have.
Yeah. But
But
I
yeah,
mean, but even before that, in the club days, you see like the early pictures of Ed, and he's got weird Mickey Mouse setups. Whatever was
orange
in his hand.
amps and like you'll see orange
Yeah,
amps. You'll see cabinets that are weird. You'll see combos.
kinds of strange stuff.
Right, you don't know
And
which one's his and what.
yeah, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he's got all this gear. Like that 70s, that everything happened in 77. It seems like those
Yeah.
pictures of them at the New Year's Eve, December of 77 at the Whiskey.
Yep.
That one from the balcony looking down. It's like that's the whole tour setup right there. With the bomb, the heads on the side, the cabinets, the whole thing.
Yeah, was it the last episode? The Mike said that the bomb was actually he had it in the mid 70s,
Mm-hmm.
and that he was for the two Univox Echoes, but he said that the other people in town would copy that idea and they'd have their own way of mounting the Echoes into something else. And one of them was he thinks it was Carlos Cravazzo, was he put it with a mannequin, a female mannequin in lingerie.
Right. Yeah, because I don't really like rack mounted stuff. Hadn't really come into any kind of other than in recording studios. I mean, when I was playing the clubs out here, I mean, there was guitar players would come in with a rack that's 5 feet tall of gear.
Sure.
Going in to play FM station or the Whiskey, and they'd have to put it on the floor because it was too big, wouldn't fit on the stage. And it's like, what do you need all that stuff for? I mean,
get it on the stage. Can get it up there.
Can get it on the stage.
Did you have any? Did you have any other like stuff that you wanted to cover?
Well, just little things. I mentioned to you like the Beat It solo when hanging out with Jeff Porcaro that in the studio, and him telling me just off the cuff stuff and just kind of remembering, him telling me, because my buddy Scotty Page, who played in Pink Floyd, was sax player. He knew all this. He played in Toto and Supertramp, these different bands, and so when he had his studio out here, those guys were his house band. Steve Lukather, Lee Scalaro on bass, Porcaro on drums. I mean, that was like his house band when they had recording sessions. And I was more enamored with drummers for some reason than guitar players. Steve Lukather's right there. He's like, it's amazing, but I was like, I don't care. That's Jeff Porcaro. I mean, he's badass. And I would sit on the floor right next to him when he's tracking, just staring at him, or watching his feet and stuff like that. It was just the experience of being around those kind of musicians was amazing. At like 1991, 92, those times, being in the LA, hair band scene, and I was more into being with these studio guys because it's like you could just learning experiences, and respect was a big deal, So anyway, hang out with Porcaro and just shooting the shit, and we're all different people around, and hearing him tell me that and I didn't even know that I knew Steve Lukather had played it, but I didn't know Porcaro played drums on Beat It, and him telling me that when they got the tracks, they didn't even know that was the final vocal and the final Eddie Van Halen guitar solo. And Quincy Jones tell him, don't screw it up because this is the master. And this is what he told me. He's like, there was no drums. It was like this sound because he thinks Michael was beating on his chest or on a box or something to keep in time. And there was a keyboard, like a keyboard track. And then, so they had to build the song around which they were given. And so Porcaro there was no such thing as click tracks, I don't think, at that point. I don't know.
Right.
And so he said he kind of invented like a click track so he could have something to play to keep in time because the time was kind of a little wonky. And then, of course, Lukather, I played bass, I played guitar. I'm like, yeah, okay, we know. I mean, he's still saying that. Like everybody knows, dude, But it was just interesting to, again, hear these, be around those people that are in that world, and it's all Eddie Van Halen connections and stuff. I mean, weird Van Halen stuff, just connections to me. The '84 tour book that has the lion coming through it. That lion.
Sure.
When in '93, I got my first tattoo. The girl who did it, Linda Harris, designed that. She was the illustrator.
Oh, okay.
For that, and her husband directed the Pretty Woman video.
Wow.
And so it's like, it's again, it's like all these little, these little nuggets of things, just being, around. I mean, how associated, again, like you manifest things, you think about it, and
Somehow it shows up in your
yeah,
world.
and you just start meeting people, and it's like, and again, it's been, I think, better to meet those people than to actually have had, I guess, that kind of relationship maybe with the actually, going to Eddie's house or the studio, or I mean, it would have been cool, but I mean, the times that I were around probably wouldn't have been the time. I
Sure,
think it would have been more
sure.
disappointing. Other than, like, you're talking about, later on when they're talking about releasing the demos as a, that
Sure.
time in Eddie's life when he would have
Yeah,
made a
yeah,
different
and
person.
it was good apparently, because
Yeah,
they both had really good experiences with him, and I did when I saw him, in 2015. It was,
yeah,
obviously a great night for him at the Smithsonian, and it just, in a way, that manifestation for me was the exact right time or exact right place
hmm,
and the right situation, and it
yeah,
was like I expected it to be, and what I hoped it would be, and more. You know what I mean?
right.
I definitely when I met my hero, it was not a disappointment at all. You know what I mean?
Well, it's funny because over the first time I met Michael Anthony was in '87 at a place called Giant Anson Ford Theater
Hmm.
in Hollywood, right across from the Hollywood Bowl, and hung out with him. He was the coolest guy ever then. And then '91, hung out with him again, coolest guy ever. Played basketball and all that stuff. And 2004, just superficially, just hey, just in seeing him interact, just so I guess it's just a personality thing or something like that. And one question I've always wanted to know, and it's just something I've just, if Ed and Dave didn't get along, why'd they always look like they're having the time of their life in every picture you've ever seen of them?
Right? They managed to somehow do it. I don't know, man.
Yeah.
Maybe
And
it's so weird to me, that they were able to do that. But Michael, like you said, I've met Michael too multiple times, and great guy, always great,
yeah,
just so
I
down to
saw him
earth.
one time. I saw him one time in Lake Havasu. I don't know if you've ever been to Lake Havasu. There's like this little river that kind of runs through the middle of I guess, the town or something like that. And there's a bridge. And I remember seeing Mike there. It was probably, oh, man, I don't know, 89 or 90. And his boat was there. It said Bocephus Moto on the back of his boat.
Yeah,
And partying, having a time of his life. Like, Mike's the coolest guy ever, And
yeah.
Sammy was great. When that time we hung out with him, again, the basketball game stuff, he was cool. And
I've never met
pals. And
Sammy,
then,
but
yeah,
my
Sammy was
buddy.
great.
My
Yeah.
buddy met Sammy. He said that Craig, that was on here a couple back, he didn't like Sammy, initially because he just was a Roth guy. But he ended up meeting Sammy in '86 when they
Mm,
came through, and he said to Sammy, Sammy said, "Well, what are you doing?" He goes, "Oh, I just would like to get in a sound check or something like that." And he goes, "I tell you what, my buddy, my guy John will come back down and set you up." And no kidding, the guy his bodyguard came down and he goes, "What do you want?" And he goes, "I want to do this and I want to do that." And he goes, "You got it, kid." And he's a
that's
kid,
nice.
and he lets
Yeah.
him and his buddy out of like nobody else really. Him and maybe four people were at the sound check, and Sammy arranged it all for him, and it was super cool to him. And he said I had to change my attitude about Sammy Hagar after that because he was so cool to
Yeah.
me.
I saw them '95, I guess it was,
Mm-hmm.
out at Blockbuster Pavilion, kind of out where the US Festival was originally.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a Sammy fan. I was a Dave fan, still a
Mm-hmm.
Dave fan, Sammy fan. The Gary stuff, I may have listened to that record once.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You know what? The I never had a thing about the Dave and Sammy thing. I loved Sammy before he was there, and
Yeah,
and then I loved him when he was in the band. It was definitely a different take on what they were,
yeah,
like with from the Roth era. But where do you go? A lot of times evolution is a needed thing. It's like we are talking about the hairband thing. There wasn't that evolution happening, and that's what killed
right,
it. I mean, it just there
right,
was
right.
nowhere else to go, and they had run it into the ground,
Yeah,
and it was ripe to be taken out. You know,
yeah.
like anything, after a while, it's just too much. So Van Halen
Mhm.
probably, I know Roth and him could have surely done another album and had a great album, after
Yeah,
'84. But how long could they have gone? So in a way, Hagar gave them another decade of
Oh
hits,
yeah.
and another life and another whole period. And then the Sharon thing, one of the people that's been on, Chris Gill from Guitar World, does a lot of Guitar World reviews and
Mm.
also articles, and was close with Eddie. He came to me about, well, we were talking about the Sharon album and how Eddie took that so hard because it didn't do well.
Right, right.
Um, and he said to me, just listen to the music. And I was like, okay, I'll listen to the music. I'll just listen to the music. And when I kind of have spent time with it more and dissecting it, Mike Post was a producer on that, who I believe was
Right.
kind of a TV engineer or producer. And those songs musically are very soundtracky. They have a very soundtrack kind of vibe to them. Underneath what you hear with Gary, I just thought Gary's vocals really strained and didn't melodically didn't. Roth always was able to. And I've talked about this before. Roth was able somehow to always put melodic things together with Eddie's music that was just so unique.
Right, right.
And even Hagar was able to do the same thing. He was able to come up with things, but I just felt like Gary struggled with that. You know,
Yeah, I think in the Gary. I mean, I liked Extreme. Like when
yeah,
their first album came out, I was like, "Well, this band's really cool." And it's funny because we used to see the Gary and Nuno outside of FM station right around the time that record came out, passing up flyers, see my band. They were playing in Hollywood someplace,
sure,
and but that record was great. But as good as Gary Sharon is, I mean, my opinion is I mean, alpha male, David Lee Roth, ultimate alpha, Sammy Hagar, alpha, and then Gary's was a little too. He never seemed like he felt comfortable with those guys because it's Van Halen at that point when he joined the band,
sure, sure.
and then
And
it's just
he was such a big fan like us.
yeah, yeah. It seemed like he stayed a fan instead of being one of them,
Yeah,
and just kind of being balls out, like I'm the lead singer of Van Halen now.
right, right.
Kind of instead of being kind of very, I don't know. It's hard, it's just, I see him in interviews even now still talking about it. He's kind of, I mean, it's just his personality, I suppose, but
Yeah, all right.
he's just kind of more reserved, and there's nothing reserved about being in Van Halen. When you're out there, you're out there,
Yeah, right. Yeah, you
and
think about. I mean, I always think when I think of Gary, I think of the Freddie Mercury thing when Extreme did that, and how strong that performance was that they did there,
right.
and how good as a band they were. But Nuno was always a very powerful force in that band. We always knew that Nuno wrote it most everything and was a big
Yeah.
part of that. And one thing that struck me about the early Van Halen stuff was that if you listen to the bootlegs, you go back and go through the songs. How much influence Ted Templeman had in the arrangements of those songs.
Yes.
And
Yes.
there's some very obvious changes that were made that were
Mm.
like even when they did the US Festival, when they do Running with the Devil, they sing the melody to the chorus different. I don't know if you've ever noticed that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
It's like, what do
And
they
then
do? Why are they doing that?
it's funny, and I was thinking about this just the other day, that it's there's something about the Van Halen sound. Like the first album is very precise in production, in execution, and then the second album started getting a little more loose, women
Hmm.
and children first, but then it got it back on Fair Warning for the most part. Then
Hmm.
Diver Down was kind of all kinds of loosey goosey,
Hmm.
and then '84 was a little bit of you know sharp and loose at the same time, and then from there forward with Sammy, every album was very um
Tight.
I don't know, it didn't have that loose feel anymore. I mean, Ed's playing was completely different.
Hmm.
um it didn't seem like they were winging it anymore, ever.
Hmm.
It was just very, I don't know, it's very unique how the Ed's playing changed. And because I remember reading something with Dave, and he's like, the I mean, Dave takes a lot of credit for things I don't know if he should take credit for. Like,
Sure, sure.
he's like, well, the first album, it's like I was singing the melodies to Ed. That's why the guitar solos sound like the way they do. Well, maybe he did. I mean, I don't know.
Right.
And then later on, Ed just jams and then they piece it all together, kind of thing. That's why those guitar solos are just all over the place. It's just no melody. I'm like, I mean, I don't know. But then when he got with Sammy, it seems like going forward from there, Ed's playing was very thought out. There was nothing was out of place. Nothing was no
Right.
mistake of any kind, no looseness.
You lost this whole
And
Holdsworthy and kind of outside the box
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. And it just
Yeah.
kind of just it was really like on track. Everything was very on track, very precise. And I don't know whose influence that would have been at all, if that was a producer thing or
Or that's just being around Sammy. He just shifted his focus to like Greg had said at one time, Renoff, that he felt like that, or I think it was Greg, somebody that he kind of would see his role as a reflection of like they would like this would be the singer and he would reflect it in a way, like with Roth,
how the singer is acting kind of thing.
like say how Roth would like do crazy shit and throw
Right.
things in there, then Eddie would kind of mimic that almost in a in a
Right.
in a way like remember when Steve Vai first did Yankee Rose and he did the whole vocal talking thing. Well, Eddie was sort of kind of doing this stuff, not like that, but like call and response with Roth.
Right.
Because they did that early on, right? But even like
Yeah.
something with Beautiful Girls at the end where they're playing the chorus and he keeps doing licks between every line.
Hmm.
It was like he's going to sing, I'm going to respond. There was a thing
Yeah.
that happened with them, but when Hagar came along, it was like he shifted to fit Hagar's style almost, or they
Yeah.
from a songwriting standpoint, it was like okay, I need to be more melodic now and being more song oriented as
Right. More
opposed to
focus.
yeah,
Yeah.
and maybe it was just because that's the way Hagar. If you listen to Hagar songs prior and then the solo album that Eddie was involved in,
Hmm.
you see that solo album is kind of like what ended up being the Van Halen we know after. You
Yeah.
know,
Have you ever seen the I'm sure you have from what's that song? It's called Catherine
yeah,
with
sure,
Eddie with that song for the
yeah,
porn movie.
yeah,
And to me, it's like just when you're watching that, I've turned a lot of people onto that. I said, you got to see this YouTube video of Ed. He's playing the drums. He's playing. I said that shows I think his genius right there. It's
yeah,
just kind of mad scientist thing. I mean, that's the era where he's out of his mind.
right,
Whatever
right,
was going on, but he is, and that's another thing with Ted Templeman talking to him over the different times over the years, saying that Eddie was the most complete musician he had ever worked with ever. Didn't matter what was going on with him personally, physically, anything. It's like he was unstoppable, and in the studio he was great. And Dave, even Ted said Dave in the studio was the hardest working one there. And it's like he's like Dave really put a lot of effort into making those records. I don't know if people would believe it, but he's like Dave was the first one to show up, last one to leave. And he put in, I mean, he really, really tried hard, and especially on the first record.
yeah. I've heard
You know,
that. I heard that about Rothman's work ethic, and I think Greg Renoff also reflected in his book quite a bit. How Roth is sort of the marketeer, the guy that had the vision, the long term
right.
wide vision, and the guys in Van Halen, where Alex was more the business guy, and then Eddie was sort of like the creative genius of it. And
Yeah,
Mike balanced it all out somehow with his personality,
yeah.
and they're just that unique combination that changed the world, man. It's
I mean,
incredible. And then of course you did have Don Landy, and Ted Templeman.
that's the guy everybody wants to hear from.
I know, and I think they're going to do it. I mean, Sunset Sound, teasing it. We'll see.
Yeah.
They've been trying to make it happen for a while, but
Yeah.
yeah,
A good friend of mine, I don't know if you've seen his Sunset Sound. My friend Danny White did a round table,
Danny,
and I've known Danny for years, and he bought Sound Techniques Company,
yeah,
the
I
mixer.
did see that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and he's made a Sunset Sound compressor module or something like that that they were using
wow.
just for Sunset Sound. But he's told me some stuff, and he's like, "Just hang in there, man, hang in there." I mean, he knows some people somewhere, and he's like, "Just because we talk about Don Landing, he's like, just hang in there, guys." So like, we'll see.
Yeah, Don Landy,
So,
he's the. I always say that nobody had spent more time with Edward than Don Landy. I mean, the guy
yeah,
was,
that's for sure.
lived with him for practically since through all the creative things, through every take, probably through the entire thing. And,
Yeah,
that is an amazing thing. One thing I have in my studio here that I've been trying to get Don Landy through some channels to authenticate is a check that I have. I have a cancel check. They do these over the years back in the 80s when you still had cancel checks. Some of them would, I don't know how they get out, whether they're, obviously they're their accountants or whatever. Somehow they got slipped out into the world and ended up
Mhm.
being auctioned and through eBay or whatever. So over the years, as I would see those come around, I would pick them up. Years and years ago. And one of them is a check to Don Landee, and that check is dated in fall of '83, and it's like 8 grand. And Greg and I think it's payment for Don's work on 5150. We think it's a piece of documentation that shows where Edward paid Don for the rewiring of the studio, and Don did all that wiring and everything. One day, hopefully, Line Deal, come to that point where I'll be able to talk to him or get some kind of confirmation on it. But it's just kind of a cool piece of documentation
Yeah.
that talks about the 5150 era and everything. But yeah, I've always been enamored with Don Landee and his contribution to those records. The whole first album with the reverb on one side, production. I've always been a production person and been in the business and done records myself. But primarily, I'm a live guy, but playing live. But always been interested in that and what Don did, and so hopefully he will come forward and talk.
And I do want to know the Eruption story from the man who made it happen. If the real story is Ed just ran through it and he went into it again and Don just happened to hit record, is that really what happened?
Yeah, right.
And I don't know if I have it somewhere in one of my computers, the unedited version of Eruption. Have you ever heard that?
No, I haven't.
Where it's like, and so in between the two pieces, the reason why it fades down is because when Ed stops, you hear his amp feedback.
Okay.
It goes or something. It's like this microphonic squealing sound, and so when they edit it for the record, they just fade the volume down and immediately bring it right back up, so you don't hear all that part. And then when it stops, they immediately go into "You Really Got Me."
Right, I've read that, but I've never heard it.
Yeah, because it was it's like, and you hear the Echoplex going, it's not fading out because they faded out on the record. It's going like that, and all of a sudden it stops, and they go and then the band comes in, they play it for 2 seconds.
Maybe I did hear that on the Sunset Sound thing when they were showing that
on there.
I think.
Yeah, I don't know where somebody gave it to me on a cassette years ago, and I don't know how they even got it, but I have it on. But I have it on an MP3. I transferred it. But so it's interesting to hear the actual raw take.
Did you get the Pasadena Civic bootleg like everybody else in the world did back in the early days?
Well, what's funny is in '87 when I moved out here, and we were trying to put a band together. We're auditioning singers. This guy shows up at our apartment one day, and he brings me a cassette. He says, "This is me live." I'm like, "Okay, cool." But he didn't say anything while he was there. He says, "Just check me out and let me know if you want to do it." I'm like, "Cool." I pop it in, and it's like it's a live show. Whoever this band is, I'm like, it sounds a lot like Van Halen, but I don't recognize one of these songs that's playing. I'm like, I've never heard this song before. And all of a sudden, it sounds like they're doing Eruption, and I'm fast forwarding, and all of a sudden I hear the singer go, "On lead guitar, Eddie Van Halen." I'm like, hold on a second. I rewind the thing to the beginning. It's Van Halen to Whiskey in '77.
Okay.
And so, and I don't know if it's that New Year's Eve show or if it's another show, but it's them in '77 at the Whiskey, and I still have it on cassette someplace. I don't know if that's out there somewhere in the world now, but we never heard from this guy ever again. It's like this guy's trying to pass himself off as David Lee Roth. I mean, I don't know what's going on here, but
that's weird.
I had this little, back then on a cassette. I don't know where it came from, but I still have it somewhere.
Well, yeah, the guy that Mike Wolf that was just on. Mike had access to the inner circle of people who recorded all of those recordings. And then he digitized those because he was an engineer, he got a DAT recorder way when DAT was not even allowed. And he digitized everything that he could, and he got off the sources. They got it from the 4 guys who did it, right? And so he had all the original digital versions of these, and that's why Eddie Van Halen came to him.
Right.
They wanted these pristine, and he had them all. So they were just basically trying to
archive.
For an archive, and for Different Kind of Truth, they culled some of the same tapes for that. But when they were trying to do the second album after that, which was another album that never got released, I guess they couldn't get with Roth on doing another album at all.
The usual, yeah.
So they decided we're going to release these bootlegs instead. And then apparently
Yeah, I have a couple of those.
they went to Roth to try to get some input, and he wanted all these weird songs that were
Right.
like he would want, and they never released it. But yeah, it's those bootlegs, man. Those were things that we kind of lived off of because they didn't release anything, and those
Yeah.
slipped out over the years. And
Yeah, I was just looking at I was going through a cassette box I had just the other day, and I found a couple. One is it's Eat 'Em and Smile,
oh,
just raw studio stuff.
wow.
It's not the whole record, and it's Dave like scatting over things, but it still sounds amazing. But I must be something that I don't know where. Again, I don't know how I even acquired it. And I have one that has Me Wise Magic, and the other song when they did that, the best of, and they put those two songs on there, and those are raw too. It's like, and Dave's just like mumbling things, and his voice is all shot to hell, and he's just making up stuff. But it's cool to hear the grooves. You can really hear the music is really cool on those. But stuff that you just acquire things. I have all this stuff on cassettes. It's like it's funny just to.
That's where my first bootleg came from. I got the Pasadena Civic bootleg on a cassette, and the solo on that is just so insane, and the tone was so much like the first record. That was the one. I think it was October 15th, 77. Was the farewell show, and
right.
Mike was there actually, and he said they brought in a professional PA that time, and he said it sounded incredible that night. And so, those tapes, man, they were just more juice for us to go out and do more and play guitar more.
I've heard, I think there's one of the Lanterman Auditorium show in Lockney out of Flint Ridge. My son goes to school across the street from that place. And have you ever seen the pictures of Ed where he's wearing like a black satin shirt with the white scarf and Les Paul?
Yeah.
That's that show.
Okay.
And I think there's one of that one, but that's like, God, that might be like 76 or something like that, maybe.
You're talking about there's a video of him doing that too.
No, just an audio recording of it.
Yeah, but there's actually a video of him. It's not.
There is a video of it?
Silent video, but it's a video from one of the girls that grew up with him. It's a little short snippet. It's a short snippet. It's on my Forever Unchained 1981 Instagram. It's just, whenever I find anything like this, where the hell did this come from? I put it on there just to keep it somewhere. And so people can see it. But yeah, there is a video where he's wearing that scarf and he's playing that Les Paul, and it's just a little snippet, but it's pretty cool. It's so.
I want to know whatever happened to the Les Paul Jr. that's on the back or inside sleeve of the first album.
He had it in 5150 for years. I mean, it was sitting there torn up, but because he tried to strip the paint and then left it like that.
That's funny, yeah. And I told you my buddy Bob Dixon had played the Frankenstrat, and he was like, "That thing is a piece of shit, man. How does anybody play it? How did he ever play that guitar?"
You know what? I told you this too in our side conversation that a lot of his guitars apparently were like that, and when they would be set up,
he can make them work. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, he could play anything. It was like it's like when we heard that first recording of This is why one of the things I talked to Steve Rosen about was that, those recordings of Steve Rosen did in his interview where Eddie's playing like either non-amplified or maybe he might be playing, but it's clean,
Right.
You can
I've heard that, yeah.
And you can really hear it.
Or something.
Yeah, you can really hear his hands, and how strong his hands were.
Yeah.
But the dexterity too. You had that weird combination of strong hand strength, but I always thought that Eddie, and I think everybody after Eddie thought that the key to that sound was light touch.
Right.
Yngwie was such a light touch guy, and he played so fast. But Eddie had a pretty hard attack.
But I've read that he kept his action low, and he played 9 gauge strings.
Yeah,
it's like why put all that effort into it? Like the guitar players that hear Stevie Ray Vaughan using 12s and 13s and stuff like sets like that. It's like why put that much stress on yourself?
Yeah, I remember him saying that. I remember saying that too, and then but there's a video of him. It was later towards the end that it's just him playing acoustic on one of the, a Frankenstrat copy that they was fixing to give to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And he's kind of whacking on it. He's doing Unchained. And you hear his pick attack without any amp again.
He's hammering it.
He's hammering it. I'm like,
Yeah.
damn, I didn't realize that he hit it so hard. You know, the Chris Gill and them were talking about him using really light picks to on the other side of that, and you know, I think that what is that one?
You know, this one's like a Finn. I mean,
Yeah,
I use Fender mediums. This is a medium right here,
yeah, yeah,
and you can definitely feel it's pretty thin.
yeah, yeah,
And all these stories about Ed and this metal pick, and I mean, he handed me this one.
yeah, yeah.
So
And that's
he
probably
was
what
that's what he was playing. So, but
46 or something, right? It's not
yeah, I
much.
mean, it's real thin. I mean, it moves really easily.
Yeah, because I mean, I went to like these, you know, 2.0 Delrins that Ingve used these things. This is a
Mhm.
1.5, but you know, I just started because of Ed, you know, all the legato and the mixed.
Right, right,
I'd say it's mixed picking legato. You know, it's kind of a
right,
mixed
right.
technique, but yeah, man, he changed everything about the way we play. You know, it's like you
I
could
know.
you could do like all these cool combinations. You'd see Lynch do it too. You know, he would do like one pick and then, or no, he'd do three hammer-ons and then one pick, three hammer-ons and one. You know, he do those ascending minor
Yeah,
things that Ed did on. You would hear. I picked all that up when I was younger, you know, and I ended up being a very mixed picker, not really a strict alternate picker.
right, right,
I
right.
kind of suck at that. I mean, that's kind of like the Ingve thing. I have a hard time with his stuff because it's just so strict, somewhat strict alternate.
Yeah,
But
yeah. Well, I was telling you before that, like when I moved out of the rock scene and started playing country music in mid '90s.
yeah,
I'm doing, because I grew up on that stuff too, and finger picking stuff. And all of a sudden, Finish What You Started comes out, and Ed's doing this like chicken picking thing. I'm like, come on, man, you can't do everything. Leave something for somebody else.
right. Yeah.
It's like, so it's like when he started doing that, I was like, oh man, it's like there's nothing you can't do.
I
That
swear,
was the
man,
thing.
it was there
Yeah,
when Rosen, you know, interviewed him way back when. You know, he had so much
yeah,
power in the hands. There's the one video from the Dutch interview where he plays Spanish Fly, very clean amp
yeah.
setting, very similar.
And it's funny when you see like, and I've said this about athletes. There's certain a physical characteristic like of his hands when he had that reach he could do and the way his hand would be contorted, but in complete control. It's like I'm pretty good sized hands and my fingers are pretty long, but I can't make some of those positions. That's that stretch when you see his. He's just, especially when he did like the Ice Cream Man solo.
Mm-hmm.
It's just something about the mechanics and the way his fingers were designed and the joints. It's like that stuff lends to all that ability as well.
And he didn't have big
And
hands. He had hands the same size as mine. I don't really have big hands, but
yeah,
his dexterity, you know, obviously probably piano when he was a kid. You know, he started
probably.
playing
Yeah,
off the big
because you have
watch.
those really light, those stretches, piano chords and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
I mean, you know, that's a totally different feel, an animal when you get wide stretches on piano. And yeah, so he had to develop some of his length and his ability
Yeah,
back
it's like
then.
the ligaments and stuff, develop a certain way after, if you spend years and years with your hands in certain positions, everything kind of changes.
It does stretch,
Yeah,
you know. I think even
yeah.
Via said that he tried to make his fingers longer just by like willing them, right? And that guy's got the longest damn fingers ever, man.
Oh,
Him
I
and
know, I know.
Paul Gilbert, they're like got these freaky long fingers, you know. And
My some friends of mine were touring with Steve Vai. I don't know if you ever heard of Eric Sardinas.
yeah, you know, yeah,
Okay, my bass player Lavelle Price that I played with for years. Lavelle was playing bass with, and they were touring with Steve Vai, and I went to see them. They were playing at I don't know, it was Anaheim. I don't know, one of those venues down there.
House of Blues.
No, it was a like a Honda Cinder or something like that. It was
Okay,
a couple thousand seaters,
okay,
and I was standing on the side of the stage watching Steve Vai play, and he's got long forearms like I do, but he does have those long, crazy fingers, and it's just the lack of effort needed to play the way. It's like, how does he do that shit? It's just like, and then I went down, I mean, because I was just walking around and stuff like that, and I'm watching from the side of the stage and just watching him do his thing with just like, and that was like the Ed thing. It's like, it was just so little effort involved, like it didn't hurt him to do it, as opposed to like Stevie Ray Vaughan. You see him playing, it looks like it's killing him. You know,
Right,
but
right.
talk about attack. Stevie said he played like he was breaking out of jail. I mean, that's how he played.
Yeah, well, big strings and
Um,
all that too. That strap.
yeah,
Yeah, man, it was
yeah, yeah,
amazing. Well, dude, I appreciate you coming on today
yeah,
and
for
telling me.
sure.
You got anything else that you missed or?
No, I don't know. Like I said, I made a bunch of notes, but I
Yeah,
don't
if
know.
there's
It's
anything
kind of
on there,
all
if there's anything,
35 years. It's
a
of
lot to
of
say,
this,
right?
but it's hard to remember a lot of it and touch on it and stuff. But it's
Yeah, man. It's
I appreciate you having on.
I appreciate you coming on, man. I love to hear all these all these different things that we're
Yeah.
weaving together a story that the documentary that did come out. Hopefully, will
Mhm.
it'll fill a hole for that. That's kind of one of the things
Yeah.
that I had always dreamed of doing a documentary, and I when I even was trying to get Greg and another guy approached me about one, and another licensing person out of Nashville who just saw my passion for Van Halen and said, "Man, you want to be
Yeah.
involved?" And I was like, "Hell yeah, I'd be involved, but I don't know what we're going to do." And we went through a lot of different things. I had a guy out there who works. He's in your area. He's in Burbank actually, and he's a Hollywood producer guy. He does Deadliest Catch and a lot of reality
Oh,
TV.
yeah,
And anyway, he was just kind of filling me in, man, trying to help me on the difficulties of doing something like that. And he didn't really feel like
yeah.
with all the licensing thing, it'd be so much harder to do that and then it just sort of blossomed from there that I had this other thing where I was interviewing other people, all kinds of musicians, and I just started thinking, hey man, I can do this documentary. I just do it like this.
Yeah,
This is the
absolutely.
stories that
Absolutely.
I would. These are the stories that I'd go find if I was going to go put one together, right? So I said,
If you
well,
need to know anything, Greg Renoff is definitely the guy. I mean, when he was out here doing his book signing, Greg introduced me to Mark Stone and the guy with the infamous party with all the people. I can't remember that guy's name.
mhm.
And it's like it's just more connections and all that stuff. It's
Greg
interesting
had
to
made
learn.
all those connections, and I kind of owe
Yeah.
Greg a debt because Greg, he's plugged me in here and there with folks that I've been trying to catch up with. But then again, as soon as some of these folks that get involved, sort of like what Greg explained, is that once you get a few people going, then they'll say, hey, my buddy was, he was here,
Yeah.
or this
Oh
happened,
yeah.
and they'll just say, hey, here's his name, call it, get in touch with him.
Oh yeah.
Or they'll get in touch with me, and it's great to be able to, to do that and get with people and meet new people, and especially guys
Yeah.
like yourself who grew up in a parallel universe, doing basically the same thing, And I was just doing it on the East Coast, and you were doing it on
Yeah.
the West Coast, but yeah, still
Yeah.
doing it, and I come out there, like I said, for NAM almost every year, just not this last couple because of the pandemic and the
I
last.
don't know anybody. I don't know anybody went to NAM this year.
Yeah, it was pretty
Yeah.
dead. I heard. So I
Yeah.
didn't. I didn't. It's more expensive right now to go out, and but I'll be back out. And when I come back out, I'll look you up, man.
Yeah, it's funny because again, citing my buddy Bob Dixon, the amp guy.
Yeah.
Bob does work from Rolling Stones down. I mean, and I think I was Bob's second client in '96. And it's either me or I can't remember the guy's name who played guitar with Alanis Morissette. Bob's like, it's either one of the two. And then he ascended to A-list, But so I would always go to the NAMM show with Bob. And like Bob says, NAMM show isn't about the NAMM show. It's about the hang after the NAMM show.
Right.
And so whenever I would be down there with him, it was like, that's how I met Grover Jackson. God, I don't countless people because Bob knows everybody. And so, and it's funny having dinner with Grover, talking about Eddie and
Yeah.
whatever happened between them. And and he's talking about Leonard Skinner, it's like, and it's all over the place.
I had that discussion with Grover too because I told you I went to dinner with him as well.
Yeah.
I went to dinner with him about 10 years ago. A buddy of mine is a boutique guitar dealer, and he was dealing Grover's guitars, and he just said, "Hey, you want to go to Grover's shop?" And I was like, "Hell yeah, I'll go to Grover's shop."
Yeah.
So him and John Gold, who was involved with him at the time, they were doing business, and me and Grover just went in the shop and shot the shit for 3 hours, And of course, I asked Grover every damn, But Grover, man, he loves to tell the stories, and he told me them all.
He'll tell you everything. Yes, that's the thing.
Everything.
We're sitting at dinner. He doesn't know me, and he's just so I don't know what really happened between those two dudes, but
it didn't turn out too good. But Grover, I mean, from what he kind of regrets it, of course. I mean, that something went wrong with their relationship.
Yeah.
We all know kind of the black and yellow guitar and that whole thing. But what's funny is in the last episode, I had some pictures from Mike Wolf of 5150, and right in the middle of the studio is one of those Jackson bar stools.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah.
Sitting right there. Obviously Fender and Jackson are together, but I thought it
Yeah.
was kind of ironic, and I actually tagged Grover on it. I said, "Well, your name's at least in the studio."
Totally. I mean, but the Randy Rhoads stuff went well, apparently.
Yeah, well, yeah, the
Yeah.
Randy Rhoads,
Yeah.
that whole story. I of course wanted to know all of that because that
Yeah.
guitar.
I've come in to know Randy's sister, Kathy.
Yeah, okay.
And in Burbank, they have
School.
it's not really open to the public anymore. They're a little wine tasting room.
Oh yeah, yeah. She.
And her husband, his niece or something like that, Darla, I've known forever. I've known forever. And so we have become friends, and I got their phone number. And so I want to go over there and check it out because it's been closed for a couple of years.
Right.
And Kathy said, just, text her husband if you want to come by, just because she has a lot of Randy's stuff. I don't know if it's there or she brings it in sometimes for certain things. So I think I mentioned to you about the white Marshall head because I know she had it on display there.
Mm-hmm.
And Greg Leon had mentioned about the Marshall and Randy and all that stuff. So I didn't know I couldn't remember if you had said it or he had said if he turned Randy onto that or how that all came.
He did. He did.
About,
He said that Randy needed a Marshall because he was playing that
Yeah.
PVPA head with some pedals. I think is what it was.
Yeah, and like an Ampeg 410 cabinet or something ridiculous.
Some crazy stuff. And he goes,
at the Starwood of all, playing those
"That's
places.
my sound." He goes, "That's not your sound, bro."
That's nobody's sound.
Right.
Yeah, I know.
Right. Amazing. Well, thanks for hanging out, man. And if you think of anything else you want to pass me as far as photos or whatever, feel free. I'll put them into the video and integrate them.
Cool. Appreciate it, Jeff.
I got your pick, and I'll put that in there for sure and put it along with the story. And
if you want to, I don't know. We talked about the Marshall cabinet,
yeah,
and the one on the bottom was Jimmy Page. It says Led Zeppelin.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. So it was like Eddie Van Halen and Jimmy Page, right? I mean, that was their gear, right there.
That's what Lynch was using. Right?
Lynch is playing it, yeah.
Yeah, Lynch has got. What's funny is Lynch has got Eddie's cabinet, and I got Lynch's cabinet. I've got one of his cabinets from years ago that ended up going up in the Midwest for a while with the case, road case, and then I ended up I bought it. I don't know what I was thinking, but they had to bring it in on a truck, because it was.
Wow.
It was the whole 412 case, and it's got the docking stencil on it and all that. And the cabinet, I had his buddy Jerry, his tech Jerry. I'd known Jerry on and off, and Jerry went through it. He said, "Yeah, he had two main cabinets he used, and that was one of them." And I had it kind of restored and rewired not long ago, and it was used on all of the big records back in the day. But
wow, that's really cool.
Yeah, it's kind of cool to have that. Just like it's probably really cool for him to have the Lynch cabinet. And they did an IR impulse response to that Van Halen cabinet that he put out. So yeah, it's pretty cool that we can do those kind of things. Sunset has their reverb now out. You can get
yeah. You get the plugins, all that stuff.
Right, it's so cool.
Yeah, real quick. The only thing I have of any significance is this Telecaster.
What's that?
Which was built. Danny Gatton.
Yeah,
you ever heard of Danny Gatton?
Sure.
Fender had the Danny Gatton. Well, Danny built that guitar himself in 1988 to go to Fender to make his signature model.
Wow.
And so where I grew up in Maryland, Southern Maryland, he lived right down the road from us.
Cool.
And so my brother knew for the car business, one of his friends. And so after Danny passed away, this friend of my brother's acquired a lot of Danny's gear and stuff in that guitar. I have a 57 Silvertone amp. That was Danny's, but that guitar is, it weighs like 11 pounds.
Is it ash?
I think it's super heavy. Yeah, super heavy. The 22 fret neck. Telecaster's only 21, and so, but it's the one he took to Fender to have them
duplicate it,
make his signature model. Yeah, because he had a 53 Tele that he traded for a car. It's like it's just a guitar, big deal.
Yeah, I went to that. Also went to that Met thing where they had the Frankenstein there.
Oh yeah.
In New York City, I went to that in 2019 and saw all those guitars. Man, there was Jimmy Page's double neck, from the song "Remains the Same" video. The outfit that he wore in it, the dragon suit.
Wow.
Dude, I was
Yeah.
like in heaven. It was all these things that I'd seen as a kid. Obviously the Van Halen guitar, the Blackie was there, Stevie Ray's number one was there. In that one room, there was Eddie's guitar, Hendrix's Black V, Blackie, Page's number one, Stevie Ray Vaughan's number one,
Mhm.
Edge's number one. They had 58 Flying V that was Neil Young's. This is in one area. Prince's one of
Yeah.
Prince's
Amazing.
guitars, one of his Hondos or whatever they are. The George Harrison guitar he bought in America before they came to Ed Sullivan. They were he came to visit his sister in
Yeah, he was
Chicago,
out here. Yeah, yeah. And he was
and
out, he came to the States before they ever came to the
and,
States,
and he
right?
bought a Rickenbacker when he was there, and that
Mhm.
guitar was at that in that display along with the
Wow.
Pete Townsend's red Les Paul, the Esquire that was Jeff Beck's. These are all in like literally 20 foot, dude. And that was just one of the rooms. It was
Yeah. The
you know
Grammy
like
Museum out here, a few years ago, the Grammy Museum downtown LA had Stevie Ray Vaughan's stuff. They
yeah
had a whole thing exhibit of just Stevie stuff. And they had the number one, and they had his clothes and his amps and his pedals, and everything was beat to hell. All of it. The
right.
pedals, the guitars, the gear, the clothes. I mean, it was just like he was relentless. It just,
Did you see that?
but it was,
You were at NAMM a few years ago, or probably maybe 5 6 years ago. If you went when Soldano first started to integrate with the company that builds all Friedman stuff, he brought the Stevie Ray Vaughan SLO that he shipped to Stevie Ray, and Stevie had it.
hmm,
And then after he passed, which was not long after he had the SLO, they shipped it back to him, and he had it at NAMM, and people were just playing through it. That amp
wow.
it used to be his. Apparently, there were a few of them made because my friend at Blackbird Studios in Nashville, who's their gear guy, um,
Mhm.
he goes, "We've got one up here, man. You need to come play this amp. It's awesome." Yeah,
Nice, nice. I had a chance to see Stevie in I think '88.
yeah,
A friend of mine was like had something to do with the production wherever he was playing. He's like, and I'll go, no, I'll see him next year. And I remember I was on so that he died in August of '90, and I was coming back from Lake Havasu to do a gig at the Whiskey,
mm,
and I was in the middle of the desert, and it came on the radio that he had died. I just pulled over and I was like,
wow,
I mean, and Stevie to me has as much influence on me as Eddie. I mean, it was that same kind of
sure.
thing, It's like, whoa. I mean, it was just what, one of
Out
those
of
kind of things
out of nowhere, man. I tell you what,
out of nowhere.
and the Van Halen thing too. When he passed, man, where were you that day, and what were you doing?
I probably take the kid to school or something. My kids to school, but it's funny because my people that I know people kind of thing had told me that he had had a stroke like a month or so before, and I kind of already knew that, and it was like, well, I don't know if that's true or not. I mean, nobody's saying anything about it, but they're like, no, he's checking out. I mean, it's over. I'm like, fuck,
So you already kind
that's
of knew
that's
this coming.
kind of. And then all of a sudden, no one said anything right away. It's like, well, he's just cancer, but and then it came out. It's like he had definitely had a stroke. I think even Wolfie had mentioned it that he had had a stroke, and
Yep.
it was just one thing on top of the next was, just it was just
Oh,
shutting down. Yeah, it was like shit. But I mean, I love that picture of him at the Tool concert where he's taking the picture of the other guy, of the guy didn't even know it was him, and it's like that was a year before,
yeah, yeah,
and he still looked like Ed. I mean, he looked good, but he was still you could tell he was
yeah.
you know
Struggling with it.
ill for sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's an amazing photo. It's one of those funny things, that like that hang around. There's the one thing where I had a guy on here who was at the Smithsonian with me when we were in line together, and he was the guy who shot the video where he says,
mm.
"Keep playing, man, keep playing," or whatever. Remember that
Oh
video?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's,
yeah, I
it's
do.
it's funny which videos, and how these things that hang around after he passed have kind of become the things that you remember him by.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
amazing,
absolutely.
those last few guys. But thanks for being on, man, and I appreciate you
Yeah,
spending
Jeff,
some
I
time with
appreciate.
me.
Yeah, thanks,
Yeah,
Jeff.
and if I'm out there, I'll hit you up and we'll get together. Maybe we'll see you at NAMM.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Go around all the hot spots. Like I said, I mean, I live around where all this stuff is happening. Where they were played at Locking Out of Flint Ridge High School and the Quad, the Lanterman Auditorium. This is not even a joke. Almost every single time I drive to Pasadena, Van Halen comes on the radio as I'm going into Pasadena.
That's wild,
Look
right?
across the Arroyo thing where the bridge is there. Dave's house is right over there. I'm like, and I always go, "Thanks, Dave. You knew I was coming."
Right, right. I have that happen
So,
to me too, man. I went to work the
yeah,
other night and walked in with my guitar. And as I walked in and set my guitars down, Eruption came on. And it just never comes on where I play. You know, it's like
yeah.
this is a hotel. You know, like a lobby in a hotel, and
Right.
Eruption.
Also, an eruption zone. That's like, whoa, that's
That's
cool.
weird, yeah. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's amazing, man. The stuff that Eddie has done, and you know, I'm just trying to document more and more of stuff that they didn't talk about
yeah.
or that people know, and
Yeah.
hopefully,
It's too bad that you can't see inside the garage anymore at their Los Lunas house. Because I went
right,
over there years ago.
right.
Years ago, you just go down the alley down the house, and you could just like literally poke your head in there. And it's like you see red stripe on the wall, a white stripe. Like, did he paint that guitar in this garage? I mean, was he
It
testing
seems like
paint or?
it, you know, there was paint in there,
Yeah,
I've seen the pictures now when they put the fence up in the last few years.
yeah, yeah.
I've been by there, but Greg said, and I think a lot of people said there was an add-on room on the back of that house, and that's where his room was. And there's
Mhm.
this picture on my Instagram where he's sitting on a couch or something in a back room with paneling, and I swear it's the room back there, you know.
Maybe so. Yeah.
But yeah, that house had ought to be a historical place for sure. They're talking about putting a marker at least outside of it from what
Hope
I'm
so.
hearing.
Yeah, yeah. And when he did pass away, the stuff that was, I mean, there was guitar there. I mean, flowers and guitar picks, and I mean, it was just so much stuff that was. I mean, it's like I wonder what happened to this stuff. I mean, I hope it wasn't just thrown in the trash. But somebody left a Stratocaster out there, and I mean, it was just, it was amazing.
It is
It was really
amazing. You
amazing.
know, one of the things too I haven't seen in Pasadena that I want to see is where the Van Halen's in the concrete. I haven't been to that spot, but
Right down the street from the house. That's the liquor store. It's right there.
I got
It
to get a
says,
few.
yeah, it says Van Halen. It says Rudy. Rudy. So I'm guessing is Rudy the
Right,
what's the
okay.
name?
Clearing,
Uh,
yeah,
and I think it says Alex. But it's right there. It's,
yeah. I got to see that next time I'm there, and the park once I get there because the park will be
yeah, yeah, yeah.
up and going
I
by
think the
then.
park's supposed to be open in the next few weeks. That'll be open in the next
And
few
the
weeks.
new
Yeah.
plaque over at the Pasadena Civic, and
Yeah, that's right on the front. So if you
yeah,
walk up the steps, it's to the right.
right
It's right by
there.
the front door. Yeah.
Right, yeah, and then
Cool.
yeah, then I got to get over to Guitar Center to see the mural, which I hadn't seen. I've seen that on video, but
I have not seen that either, so I haven't seen it. And just another weird thing, when back in the day when we all lived in Van Nuys on Oxnard Street, I'd heard for years about the Rock Corporation where they used to play out there in Van Nuys.
yeah,
Well, I thought it was actually at the corner of Van Nuys and Oxnard Street. Well, it was actually down further. It's a body shop now.
okay,
And I don't remember where I came up with found the address. I don't know if it's in Greg's book or something, but I was like, shit, I lived like 2 blocks from there. And it was,
right there.
rock and roll history right there.
That's
So
wild.
it is. So
Well, thanks for hanging out,
cool, Jeff.
man. And you have
I
a good
appreciate it.
rest of the day, brother. And I'll see you. I'll talk to you once this gets up. I'll send you a message and send me anything you want to send me to put on it. I'm going to probably edit it in a few days and probably have it
Okay,
out
cool.
next week.
All right. We'll do
Okay.
it. Thanks,
Thank
man.
you.
Take
Have a
care.
good one. See you
You
later.
too.
Bye bye.